Avengers Endgame is directed by the Russo brothers, and it stars Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Hemsworth, Paul Rudd, Jeremy Renner, and so much more. So this is the sequel to the 2018 MCU film Avengers Infinity War, which was already a filmmaking landmark of superhero movies. If you haven't seen Infinity War already, I'm about to spoil it, so beware. The ending of Infinity War was probably one of the most surprising twists in any MCU film. The villain, played by Josh Brolin, snaps his fingers and wipes out half of the universe's population. He uses it with Infinity Stones, which he collects throughout the entire movie. So now the bad guy won. So anyway, this movie starts out a couple days after the events of Infinity War, and the plot was very straightforward at first before I watched it. The Avengers basically are planning to go up against Thanos and kill him and try to get their friends back. Now, I'm just letting you know that this is a spoiler-free review, so let's get started. I was extremely surprised about how this movie began. I didn't know how quickly it was going to move, but obviously I can't say anything about it. All I can really say is that the trailers and the theories will not, and I repeat, not assume how this movie is going to play out. The trailers were very aware not to show anything. It decided to show only like a portion of the movie. About 3/4 of the movie is not shown in the trailer. So basically we get like this whole movie that we never even expected us to see. So really there's no way that you can really guess how this movie is going to go. It was full of twists and turns. I never suspected anything. The thing I love most about Endgame was probably how I could never guess or predict what was going to happen next. I never knew what was going to happen. The story, the plot, it all keeps building as it goes along. With this kind of a plot, it could be done very terribly. If they weren't careful, it could just turn into a big mess. But luckily, it was directed by the Russo brothers, and so far, they haven't made a single bad MCU film. The Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, they all turned out really well. I was really impressed on how big this movie was. It lived up to pretty much literally everything. It was really well deserving of all this hype, and I know people say hype is a dangerous thing, and it kind of made me not like Infinity War as much as I wish I liked Infinity War, but this movie really lived up to the hype. Another great thing about Endgame was probably how they used their characters and also the acting. The acting in the MCU in the past has never really stuck out to me. It's never really something I paid attention to or cared much about. I just thought of them as actors playing characters that really looked like their comic book versions, but I never really focused on their acting. I paid attention to the action, story, the direction, but I never really focused on how great the acting was. This movie really brought out the fantastic acting more than I ever noticed before, because a lot of the action was dialed down to really bring out the drama, bring out the story, make it a little more important. Everyone got the perfect amount of screen time, especially Captain America and Iron Man, obviously, but we really got a great glimpse of some of the minor characters as well, such as Hawkeye, Ant-Man, which Paul Rudd surprisingly delivered a pretty touching performance. And even Nebula had a very surprisingly big role in the movie. All the characters were utilized very well, got what they deserved, and really had the right amount of screen time, and were there when they needed to be there. Once again, sensational acting from Josh Brolin too. He wasn't really in the movie much, but when he was, he did a really great job. This was a very emotional movie for me, because I've been with the MCU for a long time. I've watched all their movies, and so really, it brought out a lot of great moments from the MCU. I honestly cried multiple times throughout, and had the biggest smile during the third act showdown, and you'll know when you see it, but when that third act comes, it's a very good moment. That's all I can say. I was so sad and so happy at the same time. I mean, really, my emotions were all over the place. It was a fantastically well-made film. My only issue with it probably was some minor changes that they made to a few characters that bothered me a little things, but really it wasn't a huge deal. During the setup of a few scenes, I got pretty scared that they would ruin moments or ruin the rest of the MCU by doing these things, but they really seem to work out at the end. So really, by all means, it's a flawed movie. But the flaws are very minor. They're not huge, they're not really noticeable, but they're still there. The ending was probably one of the most satisfying movie endings I've seen in the past decade. It ended with a huge emotional impact, but nothing really felt wrong or bad. Really, everything works out. The third act did everything I wanted it to do. It just did everything right. Despite it being 3 hours long, it was worth every minute, and it pays off. There's not a single moment where it really slows down to the point where it bores you. Really, it was the most fun I've ever had in a 3-hour movie. The first act is undoubtedly slow and dramatic, but it still entertains and engages the audience. The second act is very entertaining, very fast-paced, it moves very well, and you're really keeping up with all the characters. And the third act is just a very emotional part of the movie. I mean, it just pays off. Like I said before, this movie lived up to its name. I would even be okay if this was the last movie of the MCU, but obviously they're just gonna keep making more until they're done. They're smart, so they know when to end the MCU, and they know when is the right time for this to be over, and that's fine. As long as they respect this movie and play around with their new characters in a good way, give us a new feel for it, I'm okay with it. Avengers Endgame was worthy as the final generation film of the MCU. It did everything I wanted it to do and so much more. I still have to see it again to put out a spoiler-filled review, and I also need to see it again in order to say whether or not it's the best MCU film, let alone my favorite MCU film, so I still need to see it again. I walked out of the theater feeling really good. Like, it was a strange feeling, but I thought it was the best way to conclude a franchise like this. After 11 years, 22 films, this is what we got, a culmination of all the characters that we've gotten to know over the past decade. It was a tribute to the Marvel Cinematic Universe and gave a spectacular and satisfying conclusion. Really, in one word, the one word I thought in my head when I walked out of this was fantastic. So this movie was, in one word, fantastic. I'm going to give Avengers Endgame an A+. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I had a ton of fun with this movie. I really got everything I wanted from it. From the laughs to the emotion to the conclusion, it was a landmark of a film and so far my favorite movie of 2019. Please comment below on what you thought about Endgame if you've seen it already, and please no spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. Please give this video a like and subscribe. This is Ethan Butler and I'm out.